Thank you very much, Dan, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, Dan, looking at this news, also looking at recent events that are happening in Gaza, between Gaza and Israel, the international community has been divided over how to handle Hamas and how to also handle Palestinian authorities, such as what we just heard from the Palestinian authorities. So do you believe these groups should be treated primarily as a political entity? Who do you think should be treated as a governing body, legitimate body? Yeah.
Well, as occurs often in life, and as occurs almost always in the Middle East, the trick is to identify what is the least bad option. A genuinely good option is not necessarily available. So the right-wing government of Benjamin Netanyahu has been, for the past many years, trying to demonize the Palestinian Authority, and I've even heard them claiming that they are as bad as Hamas or worse, which is preposterous. The Palestinian Authority probably should be restored to Gaza from where they were kicked out in a military coup of sorts by Hamas in 2007. That said, Israel has legitimate claims against the PA, as do the Palestinians. PA has been corrupt, incompetent, and inefficient. It's really constituted a waste of a lot of the billions that the world community has poured into the effort to build Palestine. And for almost 30 years, as a state in waiting, they haven't done a very good job of making people confident in their ability to run a state that is functional. There are two primary reforms that the world wants of the PA. One is for them to change their educational curriculum, which weirdly still sort of educates the youth of Palestine to war and not to peace. And the other is to stop paying the families of people in Israeli prison, many of whom are pretty heavy-duty terrorists, money, which is seen as essentially encouragement for terrorists to carry out terrorism. The latter issue has been somewhat resolved to a degree by the fact that Israel had to release most of them, not all of them, but most of them, in the deal with Hamas this week. I think the PA probably should be strong-armed to do these and other reforms and be seen as a government in waiting in Gaza. And until then, there needs to be some transitional situation. They've spoken of a government of technocrats appointed, presumably in the end by the PA. With a little bit of a pretense that the PA is not yet in charge in Gaza. And of course, an international oversight committee chaired by Donald Trump, which is a little ridiculous, but the situation is ridiculous. So it's not clear, it's fuzzy. Right now, the main challenge is to get Hamas out of the way. And the main problem is that even though Trump pretended otherwise, Hamas has not formally accepted the 20-point plan that involves their disarmament and removal. And the signs to date are very bad. They don't appear to be preparing to disarm and waiting for the details of who to hand their weapons to. Rather, they're appointing chieftains all over the areas of Gaza vacated by the IDF and murdering clan officials and leaders who they deem insufficiently loyal. So someone's got to step in pretty quickly with a very big hammer, and I fear that has to be Hamas's, not sponsors exactly, but the mediators close to Hamas, which would be Qatar, Turkey, and also Egypt. It has to be made very clear to the Palestinians that there will be absolutely no reconstruction in any territory that is controlled by Hamas. It sounds cruel, and I think that would therefore have to be married to a policy that enables the Palestinians to flee those areas and to find a decent life elsewhere. It's messy. It's really not peace in our time quite yet, and that's the landscape more or less.
Dan, talking about reconstruction, I wanted to shed light or ask about this. The fact that a lot of European countries have already come up with how much they are going to be contributing to reconstruction of Gaza. And we also see a lot of countries pushing Russia to pay for the reconstruction of Ukraine after post-war. So do you think Israel should also pay for post-war Gaza's reconstruction?
That's an interesting question. Hard to say. Maybe. It'll be difficult to get the Israelis to agree, not because they lack the funds, although, I mean, they don't really need this additional expense, but because it would involve some notion that reparations are needed and that Israel created more destruction in Gaza than was absolutely necessary. And they're going to reject that idea. And if they accept that idea, that also exposes them to potential charges, well, of war crimes. The analogy is very, very flawed because the Russia and Ukraine is purely a case of Russian aggression against Ukraine, which, as far as I can tell, even though some elements in the world might agree to acquiesce with to a degree, maybe supporting the notion of paying off Russia with part of the territory of eastern Ukraine, Donbass in particular. No one really thinks the Russian attack on Ukraine is justified. Whereas in the case of Israel and Palestine, Israel was attacked. And what is clearly a genocidal attack on October 7th, killing Jews for the sake of killing Jews, and not only that, but in the most purposeful and engineered savagery, truly diabolical, I mean, perhaps I've ever seen in my lifetime. Israel's response to that is a clear case of self-defense. Did they go too far? Was there anything else they could have done? Who's to blame? It's complex because Hamas really does put civilians purposely in harm's way. Hamas, and this is hard for some people to hear, but they're naive. Hamas wants Palestinians to be killed because it has PR value for them against Israel. Hamas is a nihilistic jihadist group that seeks and thrives from destruction. Hamas used mosques, schools, hospitals, UN sites as weapons depots, as rocket firing facilities, as offices and headquarters. They did this purposely to draw fire to civilian areas. So to get Israel to now pay for the resulting destruction is going to be tough.
Thank you very much, Dan, for sharing that insight. Now, looking at this, although they have not explicitly stated that Israel has done that, what impact does this make, and also the death of this particular individual, al-Ghamari, likely to have on the Houthis' military command structure and operational capacity in the region?
Hard to say, quite possibly very little. These terrorist groups have an assembly line of terrorists that are always ready to take the position of the next person killed above them in the hierarchy. There are some iconic leaders. When Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, was killed, that was meaningful because he had tremendous charisma. He was a public figure. He was absolutely an avatar and an icon of that particular terrorist group. And their current weakening is certainly related to his disappearance and that of the entire cadre that was with him, basically. In this case, the only public figure of the Houthis, other than their spokesman who appears screaming and shouting on video every now and again, but the true leader is Abdel Malik al-Houthi. He's a major figure. His death would be meaningful. I don't think this case is as such, nor do I think there's any discussion about how Israel is responsible or not. Israel, I think, claims responsibility. He was wounded in an Israeli strike that came obviously in response to Houthi attacks. Israel's perspective is that, with all due respect to the Houthis' solidarity with the Palestinians, Israel's under attack by a terrorist group that has taken over half of Yemen, roughly. And it's not legitimate. And it's not just Israel being damaged. The Houthis at some point were impeding about a quarter of maritime trade, or at least a quarter of the global container traffic, and a huge proportion of global maritime trade, which caused price rises all over the world and caused ships that had nothing to do with Israel to have to circumvent Africa to get to Europe and to America from the east. This is ridiculousness. It's piracy. It's absolute aggression. And of course, the Houthis are criminals against the Yemeni people as well. About 400,000 people have died in Yemen in a decade plus since the Houthis have been successful in occupying parts of the country. Part of that from cholera, a lot from just war deaths, torture, misery, poverty, and absolute mania. I mean, their slogan is, death to Israel, death to America, as opposed to life to Yemen. Houthis are a very major problem. I tend to think that now that Iran has been so weakened and maybe can be chastened to stop funding and arming them, and maybe that can just be blocked. Probably the war against the Houthis, led by Saudi Arabia and the UAE, should restart. As a favor for the people of Yemen. I don't know what else to say. I've never met a person who wants to live under the rule of the Houthis, which is some weird, specifically Middle Eastern fusion of theocracy and mafia.
Yes, I agree. Thank you very much, Dan, for sharing that insight as a political analyst and from Tel Aviv.